Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Mowing the Lawn podcast. I'm here with my co-host and excellent friend, Mo.
And I'm here with my even more excellent friend, Owen,
And together, we're going to mow the lawn together, if you will.
for the Mowing the Lawn podcast.
This is our second episode, so you could say that we're officially a series, which is always exciting. They say the second episode is the hardest, so let's see how this one goes.
I think this one's going to go pretty hard.
You'd expect so. Today we're recording on Labor Day. We haven't been working too hard, but we have been working up a bit of a sweat. It's about 119 degrees outside.
Yeah, you can go back to the weather logs and check that for yourself if you don't believe us, but we were out playing tennis earlier.
Yeah.
We played a bit of a time-efficient set of first to four games.
First to four games. The results of that will be revealed shortly because they're quite relevant to the podcast. The Labor Day weekend's been pretty good for me so far. I went to the Detroit Jazz Festival on Friday, saw some excellent sets there. It was really packed though. I think they had 4 stages going and all of them were like completely filled out basically the whole time. So that was a lot of fun. Got to hear a lot of new music. What have you been up to, Mo, this weekend?
I also went to a music festival. I went to Arts, Beats, and Eats in Royal Oak. My own father had his very first live performance there, and I went and watched that, and I think he did pretty well.
Yeah, what kind of music does he do?
They did a few covers. They covered the Beatles. They did Behind Blue Eyes, which is The Who. Guitar Gently Weeps. Just sort of like dad covers, I think, is the best genre.
So he's a bit of an Anglophile when it comes to his
You could say
music
that.
covers. Well, cool. My dad doesn't do anything musical at all. Well, he tries to play the piano sometimes, but he's never been much of a music type. He did build this like bench out of wood for the picnic, and I was still really confused by that because like with a picnic you like have plates full of food and a table is like the perfect setup for that and not really a bench. But he was working all day yesterday trying to get it done in time for the picnic, and then he finished it up today right before I left to record the pod, and he's like, Owen, this thing is really heavy and I don't know if I want to carry it all the way. And I was like, well, I wish you would have saw that coming, but...
Did you tell him it was Labor Day? That you're exercising your right to not work?
Yeah. That's really the American spirit with that. Okay, Mo, do you have any bit of lawn care advice to start off this pod?
This is not necessarily exactly the lawn care, but definitely if you're outside in your garden where you got a lot of flowers, a lot of pollinators around, just be cautious of where you step. Earlier today, Owen and I were walking to the pool, and I was walking barefoot to it, and I stepped on a bee, and I unfortunately killed it, and it stung me, so it was a lose-lose situation, so just something to be cautious about when you're out in your lawn.
That poor bee and that poor Mo is all I have to say about that interaction.
What's your lawn care tip?
This is a true story. I was biking through Lansing, and I was going past a church that was on top of like a very steep hill off the road. And there was a lawn care worker mowing the lawn. And for the parts that was like on this very steep hill right along the road, he had like a string attached to the like handle and was like pulling it along from the top such that the lawnmower was like rolling along the hill. But
On
he
purpose.
was on purpose.
Uh-huh.
But he was standing at the top of it so he wouldn't have to like walk up the slant or anything.
Yeah.
Anyways, as I was riding my bike down the street, either the rope snapped in like some place or he just like let go of it, but it rolled all the way to the bottom and like tumbled into the street. There were no cars there and I avoided it pretty easily, but yeah, just don't do that.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Just don't work less smarter and less harder.
Yeah, I can't imagine that's very easy. I bet that's a lot on your core to like drag a lawnmower across a hill like that.
Yeah, maybe he had like a step restriction on his Fitbit and didn't want to like rack it up on the lawn unnecessarily.
You know how like lawnmowers have all those warning labels on the side of like don't pick it up and try to like shear the hedges or something, or I don't know, just like a bunch of warning labels that you're like think it's super obvious, and every single one of those is like a lawsuit that has happened, and so they have to put a sticker on it so that they to protect themselves.
Yeah.
I think at some point they're gonna have like a very big sticker that shows someone dragging it along a hill so that they don't get into trouble that way.
Yeah, it would be interesting to find what like the most specific warning you can get on there, but still like relevant enough for like the legal team like declares it enough of a threat and an issue where they need to make a sign for it.
Yeah.
Could you try and cut someone's hair with a lawnmower?
Yeah.
And then they might put a sign that says no cutting hair.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that they have to like draw a picture of it too. So I'm picturing like someone like sitting in a chair with like a barber bib on, and then someone is just holding a lawnmower.
Lawnmower.
Yeah, that'd be a sight to see.
Well, like we said, it's Labor Day, which is a holiday in the States about honoring the work and contributions of laborers in the country, working hard, right, for working unions. But for this Labor Day podcast, we're going to talk about some people that might not have had to work as hard.
Yeah, we're talking about Nepo babies, all varieties, and we're going to draft our Nepo babies based on which ones we like the best or like the least amount.
Just what you think is best
Just
on a list.
Just what you think is best on whichever one has caught your interest specifically on your pick is the one you're going to pick. So the way that we determined the first pick of this draft was we played a short round of 4 games of tennis, and Mo was victorious across those 4 games. So, Mo, will you kick us off with your first pick?
We'll start out, and I'm actually glad I got the opportunity to do this first pick. So for this pick, I'm going to pick, this might be perhaps, at least in my opinion, the greatest Nepo baby of all time. Probably a lot of historians agree one of the most influential people ever, regardless of your faith, and I'm picking Jesus Christ, as a Nepo baby, famously the child of God, or as the Christians believe, conceived by the Holy Spirit. Jesus, obviously a famous preacher and religious leader. He wouldn't have as much of a sway or has been as influential as he was if he wasn't for his daddy, God himself.
Yeah, a bold first pick for sure. Some might say that his life was actually harder because he was the son of God, but that's up to interpretation, I suppose.
True. And I mean, I'm also considering influence and the people he's touched and the outlasting influence he's had over the world thousands of years after his death.
Very true. Yeah, a great first pick for sure. It's hard to follow up that great first pick, but I'm going to choose a person kind of in a similar vein. I'm going to go with the great Chet Hanks for my first pick of Nepo Baby. Of course, the son of Tom Hanks, the actor, known for many, many prize roles.
Rita Wilson, the actor, as well.
Yeah.
Double whammy, if you will.
A double whammy, if you will. And you know, my draft philosophy when it comes to these Nepo babies is you get a couple of different varieties. You get the ones that follow in the industry that their parents lived in, which is like pretty objectively boring. You get the Nepo babies that are like sick of being called Nepo babies and they're like, no, I worked for this on my own, and just like try not to acknowledge it. But you get a special set of Nepo babies that really do just blaze their own trail and try to do something new. I think Chet Hanks is the epitome of that, because at the Golden Globes he could have said anything he wanted to get himself in the limelight. But what he did was just show off his Jamaican accent for all the world to see. And I can't say if it's good or not because I'm not Jamaican, but I will say it sounds very practiced. Like he has worked really hard to perfect this accent. And then he used that like 15 seconds of fame to come out with White Boy Summer, which probably got much more famous than it ever deserved to, but he does rap a verse in that Jamaican accent, which is, you know, completely off base of what you think of when you think of Tom Hanks. And I like to think that Tom Hanks is more than a little disappointed in Chet, and they probably had a long conversation when they were in the car to the Golden Globes of like, just don't do that accent, just don't do that accent. You can say anything you want, just don't do that accent. He's like, fine, Dad, I won't. And then busts it out, forging his own path. By the way, he spells Hanks Hanx. So you know he's all about that business.
He's a lot cooler. Tom Hanks didn't have the guts to do that.
No. So
yeah.
First picks are Jesus and Chet Hanks.
Chet Hanks, one of the same, I would say. Yeah, I also had Chet Hanks on my board. There's a quote I pulled for this. It's about the COVID vaccine. He says, "You ain't sticking me with that motherfucking needle. It's the fucking flu. Get over it." So I think that speaks for itself.
I think that does speak for itself. No further comments.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Mo, you're on the clock.
Actually, I would like to go back to Chet Hanks for a moment. I wasn't aware of the White Boy Summer. I was aware of the movement, the cultural movement that was the summer of 2021. It was the White Boy Summer. I didn't realize it was a song. Do you think he sent it to Tom Hanks, and there was a moment where Tom Hanks had to like listen to it in full with Chet Hanks there and be a father about it?
Yeah, at the age that Chet Hanks is, I hope that he's just like past the phase of like, oh, that's really good, Chet Hanks, and like actually gives him his honest opinion. But like, also part of me wants to think he's a good dad and is like, yeah, this is good work, son.
Yeah, good job, proud of you. You really hit White Boy Summer. White boys haven't had their time yet recently, so.
Do you think he made him spell his name with the X just to distance himself a little bit more?
To distance himself from the Hanks branding. So for my next pick, I'm gonna go with someone who did change their name to sort of separate themselves from their nepotized path to fame and stardom. I'm gonna go with Nicolas Cage, whose original name was Nicholas Kim Coppola.
That's much too foreign.
Mm-hmm. Well, nephew of the Francis Ford Coppola, famous director, obviously a family that's very established in Hollywood. But this was, when I first found this out, it was a bit surprising to me just because Nicolas Cage is so accomplished and talented as an actor that it seems like without his networking and things, he would have probably made it on his own. I think his most famous movie is National Treasure 2, Book of Secrets. He was also in the new Spider-Verse movie and maybe a few others. Yeah, definitely well integrated into the Coppola family. His grandparents were composers and actresses, and there was a story where he was in the car once as a teenager with his uncle, Francis Ford Coppola, where he said, "Let me give you a chance to show you what real acting is." And apparently Francis Ford Coppola just completely ignored him, and that the silence in the car was deafening in that moment. Because obviously Francis Ford Coppola has worked with many accomplished actors in his time, and for Nick Cage to say that as a teenager to him, I love that. Yeah, Nicolas Cage, number 2 pick for me.
A solid number 2 pick for sure. Whenever I think of Nicolas Cage, I just think of that iconic moment from Wicker Man where he's surrounded by bees, and he keeps screaming "not the bees" as loud as he can, which makes sense of why you'd pick him. You can empathize with him.
Yeah, being just stung by a bee, not the bees.
Yeah, great pick all around. I would like to pick my next Nepo baby as someone that did follow in the same industry as their parents, but just did way more with it than they could ever do. So for my next pick, I'm going to pick George W. Bush.
W.
They both became the president.
Mm-hmm.
They both started a war in the Middle East. They
Iconic.
they both gave ultra tax cuts to the rich, but one of them did it way better than the other one. How many years did Desert Storm last? Not as many as George W. Bush did. That's a 20-year conflict, at least, if we're still counting it.
How many more kids died in each war, if you really think about it?
If you really think about it. So, George W. Bush is my next pick for just eclipsing his father in every way. And he was a 2-term president.
Yeah. Pretty hard to do these days.
Pretty hard to do these terms, if you think about it.
I also had George W. Bush on my list. I think aside from being a president, he also that gave him the platform to give so many of our now beloved Bushisms. I still 2 decades misunderestimate has been a regular part of my vocabulary, which is probably one of my favorite Bushisms.
Yeah.
Just simple to use, easy to throw into any conversation. Misunderestimate. There's that moment where he was being interviewed on the golf course once where he said, "I call upon all nations to stop terrorism," and then he immediately went to "Now watch this drive," and went and hit the golf ball after a very serious conversation about terrorism. And this one that was actually said on my birthday in 2001, he says, "You teach a child to read, and he or her will be able to pass a literacy test." Speaks for itself.
Speaks for itself. And there's so many more iconic moments of him too, of just people talking about him. I just like that iconic moment where Kanye West, he's on TV with Michael Myers and he just flat-footedly says when talking about Katrina that George Bush doesn't care about black people. and everyone in the studio just gives him this like blank stare when they realized exactly what he said.
And especially Michael Myers, who's just standing right next to him as he's calling out the president for not caring about black people, and then his deer in headlights sort of face where he realizes the clip that he's going to be a part of forever, and that even an accomplished comedian like him couldn't diffuse the situation.
Truly an iconic Nepo baby moment.
A real catalyst for a lot of big cultural moments in the 2000s for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely respect that pick. For my next pick, I'm going to go with something that's a little more unique, which I think is why it's so high up on my draft board. It's going to be Robert Grant, who in the 90s was a major executive that invested heavily in web domains, and then his daughter, Lana Del Rey, became a very successful musical artist in the following decades, and in turn Robert Grant started his own music career off of Lana Del Rey's fame, and in turn became his own musical artist, playing the piano, releasing some well-listened to songs, well-received songs, got a lot of streaming on Spotify as I was doing my research, and I think this is a unique symbiotic relationship between Nepo Baby and Nepo Daddy, if you will. Lana Del Rey obviously used her father's wealth and connections to lubricate her own career in the music world, and then Robert Grant in turn used Lana's fame and stardom and fandom in the music to start his own. So I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's kind of a give and take.
Yeah, exactly.
Versus most Nepo babies that just take and
Exactly.
never give back.
Yeah.
Or
It's really the American dream right
yeah,
there.
about half of these that we've said have just disappointed their parents. And
Yeah.
here we are, Robert Grant, giving back to family. Yeah, a great pickup for sure. All right, for my next pick, I'm going to pick Jaden Smith, the son of Will Smith, of course. And he's kind of a double Nepo baby because he also gets nepotism points for dating Tyler, the Creator, and getting featured a lot on both Flower Boy and Igor, which elevated his music career. And the specific reason I picked Jaden Smith is because he kind of likes to play it both ways. Like I was talking earlier about some Nepo babies work really hard, try to be very independent of their parents, and others try to stay with the family name and the family brand. And he plays it both ways. Like specifically on the song Icon, 2 lines apart, he's like dissing his family and like, I'm above it all, my own man. And then he's talking about like the Will Smith like legacy and stuff. So I just appreciate how you can take from both pots to make your own special brand of Nepo baby.
Yeah, and this is also an interesting take because while he does try to distance himself from it, Will Smith in the mid-2000s was probably the biggest star at the time, and that no matter like how far you try to distance yourself from that, you can't like get out of that wake that someone that big creates for you. But yeah, he has done his own things and they have been great. I love that Karate Kid. That song with Justin Bieber, Never Say Never.
Yeah.
Also very good. And then recently in 2018, he was in Skate Kitchen, and I thought he was phenomenal in that. It was a great character, great movie overall. So I would say I'm a fan of Jaden Smith.
Just an icon living.
So for my next pick, I'm going to go with a Nepo baby that absolutely used the chain created by their predecessor to make something for themselves. So I'm going to go with Whopper Jr. Obviously preceded by Whopper Senior, and I think it's just like a regular hamburger, smaller in size, that was a very big hit. And it was actually created by accident due to supply chain issues. A newer Burger King restaurant didn't have the big molds to create a burger, so they're like the Whopper sized burger, so they used the small regular burger mold and put the Whopper ingredients on it and created the Whopper Jr. And that was such a huge success that it took off, and now today we can order Whopper Jr. and a Whopper Senior if we want to at the Burger King. Obviously the Whopper Senior came out in 1957 and the Junior didn't follow until 1963, so it was a bit of a 6-year wake that Whopper Jr. came into, and I feel like it's just a normal burger. I don't think it would have made a big of impact. It would have stuck as hard in the industry if it didn't have such an iconic burger like the Whopper Senior to precede it.
Did that start the trend of like other junior burgers? Because there's like at Wendy's you can get like bacon cheeseburger and a junior bacon cheeseburger and other things. Was that the first junior?
Sorry to disappoint you, but my burger historical knowledge isn't that up to date, and I wouldn't be surprised because this is the 60s, which is like the beginning of sort of like the fast food in America sort of thing, so I wouldn't be surprised if that did start the precedent of making a little junior.
A surprise pick for sure. This was not on my board whatsoever. But the surprising ones are good. When's the last time you had a Whopper Junior?
I don't think I've ever had a Whopper Junior or a Whopper Senior, to be honest. But that just speaks to how culturally significant they are.
Yeah, I probably haven't been to a Burger King since I was in high school, which kind of speaks to just how good it is.
As a franchise.
That's for a different story.
Mm-hmm.
For my next pick, I'm going for Brooklyn Beckham, son of David Beckham, the guy that bends it like himself. And Brooklyn Beckham kind of reminds me of when it was like the pandemic and people like wanted to pick up a hobby right away for it, and they would buy all the equipment for it to like jump into it, and then they would do it for a week and then they'd give up on it, and then they just have it all lying around like sourdough bread. Like that was a big thing, and they would buy all the pots and pans. So Brooklyn Beckham came out with a couple different photo albums. None of them really took off. So I did YouTube for a little bit. That didn't really take off. So then he went to cooking, and specifically on Good Morning America, they had him doing a cooking show, and he decided to show America how to make egg sandwiches.
Oh, complicated.
Didn't really. He got some good looks from his dad, but other than that,
he's a double Nepo baby. Because
Yeah.
Posh Spice, the Posh Spice of the Spice Girls, is his mother. So
yeah, double Nepo baby.
love to see it.
Put into good work making egg sandwiches on Good Morning
Yeah,
America.
I mean, or the name is the recipe. So really, really glad Brooklyn Beckham was there. I'm gonna stick in the sports realm for this next Nepo baby, and this is a Nepo baby that I think outperformed their predecessor, and that's of course Steph Curry, son of Steph Curry, or Del Curry as he's more famously known as. Obviously, Steph grew up while his father was playing, so he had access to NBA facilities and trainers, and then of course genetically predisposed to be athletic and perform well at his sport. But he quite significantly outperformed his father. Steph Curry famously 4 times NBA champ, 9-time NBA All-Star, and Del Curry was once won the NBA Sixth Man of the Year award. So I think this is, while he was a Nepo baby, quite a bit of skill and talent as well to basically change the game of basketball.
Yeah.
As many people say.
I think my favorite Steph Curry quote is on his master class, if you pay to watch it. On the very first lesson, he says people ask me all the time, how can I learn to shoot like you? And I always tell him, you can't. I've been doing this since I was 4 years old. You won't be able to shoot like me, but I'll get you to shoot better. And that kind of brutal honesty, I think, is what we need out of teaching in this country, because it's too soft these days.
Mm-hmm. It's sort of like a realistic take on his sort of privilege that he's had. Like, he recognizes that he was access to an NBA pro since birth to help perfect his game, whereas some of these other people on our list maybe aren't fully embracing the hand-me-down talent.
Yeah,
and
for
fame.
sure. Yeah, for my next pick, I'm also going to do a basketball player, except I'm going to do Gary Payton II, son of Gary Payton,
The Glove.
who is known for his athletic ability and defensive prowess. While Gary Payton, unlike Steph, he's a mere shadow of what his father was. His father does have one of the most savage quotes of all time about him. When he was asked about Gary Payton II's athleticism, he said, "He's just an athlete, man. I was wondering if the mailman came by when I was out of town. Wherever his athletic ability came from, I'm just happy he got it." Which is kind of a dig on himself and his whole family. It's just an unhinged quote altogether. And if you interpret it the right way, he could be referring to Karl Malone, whose nickname was the Mailman, and also quite athletic in the NBA.
True.
So just raises more questions than answers altogether.
Yeah, but I am a fan of Gary Payton and Gary Payton 2, GP2 as I call him. Definitely a role player and good to watch. Yeah, it is some of what his father's shadow, being a defensive player, but entertaining for sure to watch. Great pick. For my next pick, I will go with another Nepo baby that might have a bit of a complicated relationship with their father, and I'm going to go with Goro Miyazaki, son of the famous Studio Ghibli co-founder Hayao Miyazaki. His father obviously casts quite a big shadow, being the iconic film director and creator that he is. Goro has been sort of trying to live up to his father's footsteps for quite a while. I think his most successful work was with the Ghibli Park, which is like a theme park based on the Studio Ghibli animation studio, but instead of being like a Disney or something or a Universal, they do their own thing where there's not like an amusement park, there's not rides, it's just path through the forest or an excuse to get people to go like spend time in nature and experience being outside. There's not like any gimmicks, no touristy things. It's just like basically a national park but with the theme of Ghibli. And I think that's a creative way to sort of like use the stardom to pair it well with the theme of your films, with the importance of nature and getting out and enjoying it. And I think that's one of Goro Miyazaki's biggest successes, which I'm a fan of. He also tried a bit in his own filmmaking career and famously invited his father to a premiere, and his father didn't like it so much that he walked out in the middle of his premiere of his movie. So definitely another complicated relationship, but Goro Miyazaki is my next pick.
Well, they say the best art comes out of complicated like childhood and stuff. I'm just curious if at the amusement park they've got like the food that they eat in the Miyazaki movies, because they always make it look so
good. And I feel like, yeah, that would be dangerous, wouldn't it?
Like, I remember in Spirited Away, like, when her parents just, like, start eating so much food that they turn to pigs, and I'm like, I would be right there with you. That all looks so good.
So good. And, like, it's film, but the smell, for some reason, translated so well in that scene.
With my next pick, I'd like to go with just a solid one that I'm shocked is still on the board. I'm going to go with Miley Cyrus, of course, daughter of Billy Ray Cyrus and goddaughter of Dolly Parton. Just another one of those examples. She's definitely eclipsed Billy Ray Cyrus.
Yeah, almost like Steph Curry level eclipsed.
I think history will show if she's eclipsed Dolly Parton, but at least they are, I think, of tangible levels of cultural influence and musical achievement. I like that she's not afraid to switch up her style of music, and she doesn't get too stale and bland. And it's almost like when you cut open like a tree and you see all the different rings of how long it lives. Like you can see all the different eras of Miley, like from Disney to post-Disney to Wrecking Ball. It shows the level of musicianship that I'll probably never achieve.
Yeah, and I fully agree with this one. This is a great pick. Yeah, Miley Cyrus definitely, despite like all the connections and people she knows, still being like her own artist and doing really well and being her own thing. Like the album Bangers, properly named because it is literally all bangers. It's a great album. Kind of forget that she is a Nepo baby just because she's so much her own artist at this point. I'm going to stick to the musical theme for this one. This is an artist I quite like, and I've been listening to this for quite some time, and I always knew she was a Nepo baby, but I didn't know exactly how, and this is going to be Clairo. I've seen quite a few great songs. But her father is Jeff Cottrell, who is the chief marketing officer of Top Golf. Not what I was associated with Clairo, but definitely some money there involved. And then also, as of 2014, he's the vice chair of the Grammy Foundation, which is the Grammy Foundation, the musical.
Oh, those Grammys.
Those Grammys, the music Grammys. So definitely has some connections, definitely knows the industry, and probably helped Clairo get such an early start that she did, but still great music, still a fan.
Oh yeah, certified bangers all around.
Without the Z though. It's Miley Cyrus.
Alright, for my next pick, we've talked a lot about Nepo babies that get a boost or some positive resources from their parents and their fame, but I'm going to pick one that definitely only got negative affection from their parents. I'm going to go with Yakov, Stalin's son. Famously fought in the Second World War, was drafted just like any other able-bodied man in the Soviet Union at that time, and was captured in a POW camp, and Stalin was given a prisoner exchange option to get his son back, but he felt that it was unlike the communist way of doing things to place so much importance in your son rather than any other ordinary citizen. So in a cold move, declined the option to prisoner exchange back his son, who then later died in that POW camp. So poor guy to be Stalin's son.
Right. What he would have given to be a Jaden Smith, if you will, or George W.
Yeah.
Instead, got sent off to die in the means of solidarity.
Well, we can't all be George W. Bush.
Exactly. It is hard being an Nepo baby. I think we haven't covered that enough in this podcast. Great pick.
All right, just a little recap on the picks. We have made 7 each so far. Mo has Jesus, Nicolas Cage, Robert Gramp, The Whopper Jr., Steph Curry, Goro Miyazaki, and Claro. Owen has Chet Hanks with an X, George W. Bush, Jaden Smith, Brooklyn Beckham, Gary Payton II, Miley Cyrus, and Yakov Stalin.
Love these lists. I think the Jesus to the Chet Hanks.
Yeah, that's my favorite so far.
And to Nicolas Cage. Yeah, well done. I'm also gonna pick a Nepo baby that's had a pretty tough time for being a Nepo baby. Maybe just as bad as Stalin's kid. So I'm gonna go with Paris Hilton. Obviously, heir to the Hilton hotels, and definitely was one of the first people to be famous for being famous in the early 2000s. Got so much shit for that. She was also a bit of a pioneer. She was a cultural icon, one of the first social media influencers. Some people credit her with popularizing the selfie. And she was a big influence with the early consumerism and materialism of the early 2000s. And I think we can't undervalue that as a society.
Yeah, I had no idea that Paris Hilton was the Hilton Hotels. I had not made that connection until just now, actually. But we all have to get our start somewhere, and sometimes it's just being related to people that start one of the largest hotel chains in the world.
And just being like so rich that you're famous because of it. And I think all the positives and the negatives that come with that, Paris Hilton really was the bleeding edge for that. And I think that's why she's up there on my list.
Well, for my next pick, I'm going to go with someone who I consider to be a yogurt juggernaut, Jamie Lee Curtis.
Whoa. The Jamie Lee Curtis.
The Jamie Lee Curtis. Probably most known for her Activia commercials, but is also an actor.
I don't know. Is it Jamie Lee Curtis Activia commercials?
Well, anyways, daughter to Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh, who is famous for being the woman that screams in Psycho as she's getting stabbed in the shower.
That's Jamie Lee Curtis's mom?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah. So, again, a double Nepo baby. Other than that, she has dominated the yogurt scene for years. She's like the Flo of the Activia yogurt scene. Also was huge in Freaky Friday, where she switches bodies with Lindsay Lohan. That must have been a really fun movie to act in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where you get to act like a 40-year-old or like a 20-year-old again and just get away with it.
Yeah, I think that speaks to her own cultural significance. I didn't even know she was an Nepo baby. She famously won an Academy Award for Everything Everywhere All at Once recently.
Yeah, that's true.
And now I didn't recognize him at first, but looking back on these Dan and Activia ads, that was 100% Jamie Lee Curtis. I just didn't know who she was at the time. Yeah, truly
an icon living.
Truly an icon living. Jamie Lee Curtis. For my next pick, I'm gonna start with a little story about Anna Mara. She started doing improv comedy in Chicago in the club that is now known as Second City. And she did it with a little duo with her boyfriend, now husband, Jerry Stiller. And they became a duo comedy act, eventually becoming regulars on the Ed Sullivan Show and the Late Night Show. And of course, their son is Ben Stiller, most famous for the Night at the Museum trilogy. Other movies too, probably, but he used his fame from that to direct and produce one of my favorite shows of recent time, Severance. So, Ben Stiller, another double Nepo baby. Jerry Stiller, of course, I know him from King of Queens. But yeah, both his parents were very successful in the comedy scene, so it makes sense they would go on to perform well comedically in the Night at the Museum movies and then direct the show that, while being funny, is also very heavy and complicated in Severance. So, Ben Stiller.
Yeah, just won't sit still or constantly working.
Yeah. Ben Mover.
Ben Mover. That's what I should call him. Great pickup. I thought these later round picks would be like more stale than they are, but we're still finding some nuggets in there. For my next pick, I'm going to go with Robert Downey Jr., whose father was a film producer, so of course he'd end up in movies. And the main reason that I wanted to pick him is that, like, his most famous role, Iron Man, is also a Nepo baby.
Yeah.
So it's like Nepo babyception. And maybe that's why they cast him, because they knew that
Yeah.
only a Nepo baby could play a Nepo baby. I think in Iron Man's case, his father was also an inventor, so it is like same industry, same industry.
Yeah, just leading the way. I think in both fiction and real life, he's been more successful than his father. But in a way, you can consider that another double Nepo baby.
For sure.
Nepo baby real life, Nepo baby fictionally. Obviously, such a huge success. I feel like those Marvel movies wouldn't be what they are today without those first few Iron Man. So
Yeah, he kind of really like hyperinflated what those actors are getting paid, which is a good thing. Because I think on the first Avengers movie, he was like, I want my salary for this to just be 2% of the gross. And they're like, okay, whatever. And then he made like $500 million or
Yeah.
something.
and
Crazy.
yeah, that's president 'cause that's more than most people ever make ever.
Yeah.
So, good for him. So for my final pick, I'm gonna go with a double pick because they're both Nepo babies and they're siblings. These are two actors who I've enjoyed things they've both been in, and I also didn't realize they were Nepo babies. It's gonna be Timothy and Pauline Chalamet.
Oh, great picks.
Great picks. They're both obviously very successful on their own. Their mother was on Broadway, and their uncle was a director, most famously Gilmore Girls and The O.C. So they definitely had it into the industry, but still quite talented, still enjoy what they're in. So that's why they made it into my list. There's a little mini double pick there.
Yeah, I feel like I saw Timothy Chalamet in one movie, and I thought like, oh, he's kind of interesting, and then he just like started popping up all over the place. Have you seen the trailer for the new Willy Wonka?
No, where he plays
He
the
plays
Willy
Wonka, and it's like one of the weirdest casting decisions I've ever seen, at least just from the trailer. But maybe the actual movie would come out.
Yeah.
But he plays like really serious, like not goofy roles all the time.
For the Willy Wonka, that
Yeah.
whole thing is being silly.
Well, I guess we'll find out.
Yeah,
But
I know the director for that movie is the same one that did the Paddington film, so I feel like it can't be bad.
yeah, can't be
based
that
on
bad.
those. So I'm excited to see that. And I think, yeah, he famously did well in Call Me By Your Name, and then after that he was popping up and everything, and I feel like he's crushed it in most things.
Yeah, very true. All right, so for my last pick, I'd like to reiterate the things that I look for in a good Nepo baby because I feel like this person fails on all levels with that and is perhaps the ultimate Nepo baby in some sense. So it really should have been my first overall pick, but that's neither here nor there. So with a good Nepo baby, I look for people that stay out of the industry that they're in. They work really hard, they try to distance themselves from their parents, and they try to admit that they are a Nepo baby and not kind of shy away from it. So for my pick, I'm going with King Charles III, who did not really work a day in his life until he was in his well into his 70s, and then just got the same job that his whole family line has had.
Yeah, where he's in an industry where being a Nepo baby is the president. That's like the norm.
Well, president actually does work. It's like not quite even that. You just have to show up to things and be like, I am the king. Yeah, famously, no one from the royal family showed up for the Women's World Cup final, which was quite disappointing because that's their whole job is to just show up to things. So yeah, that's my final pick. Yeah, I take it back. He deserves to be last. He's not my first pick.
Yeah, I was wondering if we'd get any royalty. The nepotism is sort of built into their family line.
Yeah.
But I'm glad we got one here, especially with that pick. One of the best ones we could have.
To call back the picks, Mo has Jesus, Nicolas Cage, Robert Grant, Whopper Jr., Steph Curry, Goro Miyazaki, Claro, Paris Hilton, Ben Mover, and Timothy and Pauline Chalamet. While Owen has Chet Hanks, George W. Bush, Jaden Smith, Brooklyn Beckham, Gary Payton II, Miley Cyrus, Yakov Stalin, Jamie Lee Curtis, Robert Downey Jr., and King Charles III. I think that's a beautiful bookends to start with Jesus Christ and end with King Charles III.
Yeah, it really is.
Any other Nepo babies that you want to shout out quickly?
I would like to shout out someone I thought for a while was a Nepo baby, but actually wasn't, and that's Michael B. Jordan.
Yeah.
I thought for like there was a good period where I thought he was Michael Jordan's kid, and just did it on his own. I think that's great.
Yeah, I want to shout out O'Shea Jackson Jr., who is the son of Ice Cube and portrayed his father on Compton, or Straight Outta Compton, that is. So I think that's a beautiful line of nepotism that you get to play your father in a
Literally
movie.
his dad, and he did a great job of it.
They did a great job of it too, I think.
Respect there.
Yeah, I also we talked about family lines of nepotism where there's layers of nepotism. So I want to shout out Una Chaplin, who was in the third season of Game of Thrones, and she is the descendant of Charlie Chaplin. So that is 110 years of Chaplin dominance within the film industry.
Good for them. Wow, I didn't realize she was Charlie Chaplin's granddaughter.
Wow, just granddaughter. I thought it'd be way more removed than that.
Wow, good for her. Good for the Chaplin dynasty.
The Chaplin dynasty.
Well, I had no idea about that one. That's kind of crazy. Guess I don't really know what Charlie Chaplin looks like.
Yeah, I just know his mustache went out of style really fast.
Yeah, if only there wasn't someone a little bit more famous than him that had the same mustache. He'd still be around today.
Still be around today. Yeah, so that's our picks. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Mowing the Lawn POD. If you would like to suggest any future podcast topics, you can DM us on Instagram.
Or just other Nepo babies that you think we missed, that you think are up there with Jesus Christ and Chet Hanks. Just let us know.
Yeah. Obviously, they won't beat out those because those are the two best Nepo babies.
The two biggest ones, I'd say.
Suggest future podcast ideas. If you want to be a guest star on a podcast, send us a DM and a resume, and we'll consider you for a future episode.
Cover letter too, please.
Cover letter 2, at least 3 references.
Yeah.
2 professional.
2 unprofessional.
2 unprofessional.
That adds up to 3. Join us next time for our episode on the best rivers.
Mississippi #1, baby.
Oh, that's what you think.
All right, we'll see you next time.